Hello, my name is Shelby Wilson, and I'm a student at Mississippi College. For one of my classes, I had to research an article about motivation in middle grades. I chose an article called Case Study Exploring the Reading Engagement of Middle Grades English Learners by Maria Porter. I chose this article because the growing number of English language learners in our schools is astonishing. We have so many, and it's hard for us to give them the services that they need. So, I chose this article so I could research how I can motivate them to read for enjoyment and not just because they have to. So, a summary of the article is she follows 4 students who are English language learners in a school and see how their motivation for reading either grows or decreases. So she finds out what types of books they like, what do they enjoy reading, what do they like about reading, and why do they read. And it's very important to understand why a student reads. Are they reading because they have to, or are they reading because they enjoy reading? Now, there are so many have-to reads. We have to read textbooks. We have to read articles for class, like this class, or we have to read passages on a state test. But then there's enjoyment reading, and that is being able to pick up a book and not wanting to put it down, finding something that you enjoy reading. I personally enjoy historical fiction, and one of my favorite authors is Carolyn Meyer. And I discovered her actually in middle grades. I was in 7th grade, and one of the first books I read by her was The Bad Queen, Rules and Instructions for Marie Antoinette. And reading that book opened up an entire world of fantasy for me, even though it was historical fiction. I am not a big fantasy reader, but I was able to see the movie in my head and go back to that time. And I still enjoy reading. And so I want my students to enjoy reading also. So in the article, she points out these steps. When a student has high levels of reading engagement. So these are just kind of guidelines when we can look at and say, okay, they are engaged, they are motivated to read. So of course the first step is they are motivated to read. And motivation is 2 types of motivation. You can be intrinsically motivated, which means you want to do it. No one is making you do it. But then there's the extrinsic, which means if you read, you're going to get a good grade on the test. Or if you read so many books and take so many AR tests, you're going to get a grade. Well, that's extrinsic. And even though, say, if you're reading for AR tests or reading because you're going to get a grade, some of it is extrinsic, but a lot of times it is intrinsic. But we want students to experience the intrinsic motivation for reading. The second step is they use strategies when reading. And some strategies that we teach, and I have them listed here, we have the comprehension strategies, and these help our students go through their reading and so they can comprehend it, ask questions. So we have the main idea and supporting details, and that's just to help students understand what is the passage they are reading talking about. What is the author trying to say? And then what are those details that are helping the main idea of the story? And once they can point this out, it can help them answer questions, such as on their state test, or just help them be a better reader in general. And then you have making inferences. So this is like you're reading, you're like, I wonder, predicting what is going to happen. And we use dual dialogue journals for this. Summarizing, and this is a very big skill in kindergarten for sure, probably first grade also, is reading a book and then being able to regurgitate that information and tell what happened. And that is a very big skill when we're teaching reading. Another one is the multiple gist strategy. And this is trying to get the gist of the story. Then you have the question-answer relationship, the QAR. And this is, the question is asking you something, but then where you go and find the answer. Are you having to find it in the text? Are you coming up with it on your own? Are you using inferences? Are you having to read the text and then make a inference on what the text is about? And then we have another one is questioning the author, and that's the QTA, and that's a QTA strategy. And that is when you're reading, you're like, why did the author do this? Why does the author use two different color texts? Why does the author tell us the date? Why does the author tell us the location? Why does the author include a map? And that's why. And the question why is we always, it's funny because we always tell our students, you do not ask why, you don't do that, but you should. You should go driving down the road and ask why are there trees on one side and why aren't there trees on the other side? Because questions is what makes us different from animals. When someone tells us something, we can say, why am I doing that? And that's very important for reading. And another one is question generation, which is asking why, or where, who, what. And these strategies are so important for comprehension. And yet, we don't use them. And why? Why don't we use them? We should. So, Maria Portico, she goes on in her article to say that in middle grades, there's a decline in reading motivation. And why? In middle grades, that's where I really found what I wanted to read. And yet, they don't want to. So, reading is important for our English language learners, mainly because it helps them reach out to their English-speaking peers. It helps them to talk about a piece of literature that their English-speaking peers have read, they have read, and they can come together and talk about something that they both enjoyed. And so that not only creates motivation for reading, but also creates friendships, which are so important in middle grades. So the results of this study show that the motivation to read using strategies when reading, using reading as a way to construct meaning from text, which is comprehension. That's why we read, is to construct meaning from text, which is comprehension. And if you're not doing that, then you're not reading. So, students are unmotivated to read educational text and academic text, which makes sense because they're boring. As a college student, I can tell you they are boring, and I don't want to do it. But we also need to find where our students' interests lie, and a reading interest inventory is a wonderful way to do this. So we can go and we can see what our students like to read, when they like to read, and things that will help us as educators put the right books in their hands. So when teachers are teaching, we also need to consider the cultural, ethnic, religious backgrounds of our students so we can pick diverse books to teach. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we need to do more of that. We need to use books that show a broad range of who we are as a world. We are so ethnically diverse, culturally diverse, religiously diverse, and we need to represent that and show that in our classrooms. And it's so important. So, motivation is the drive to do something. And as I said, it is intrinsic and extrinsic, and we want to create an intrinsic motivation in our students to read. We want them to pick up a book at every chance they get and read. And mostly we want to find what their interests are and put a book in their hands that they want